Good Thursday evening, and welcome to our third in the series of many SMB series. Tonight, we're going to do a deep dive on the topic of adapting your business to this new environment. And I want to first mention that we're very happy to have you here. I think we've assembled a really good panel. The reason we chose to do this topic tonight is that in the last SMB series, we conducted a poll, and this is where the energy was. So I'm very confident we're going to have a good discussion. I want to start by introducing the moderator, Gavin Christensen. Gavin is the founding visionary at Kickstart. He is a true VC from the beginning. He loves being a part of the startup journey for entrepreneurs in the Mountain West. And he also loves losing to me at tennis. Gavin, you'll have the last word on that one. Gavin's a good friend. Davis Bell. Davis is the CEO of Canopy Tax. Prior to joining Canopy, he spent the last decade working at other SaaS companies, including Peak, Sales Rabbit, Instructure, Imagine Learning, and before that, he spent time at Morgan Stanley, Bear Stearns, and DirecTV. Davis is an alumnus of BYU and Columbia. Dave Groh. Dave is a president and COO at Lucid. Since joining the company in the basement 9 years ago, he has been responsible for building out business teams, including marketing, sales, customer support, and operations as the company has scaled to 600 employees and $100 million in ARR. What a remarkable success story. Congratulations, Dave. Prior to joining Lucidchart, Dave worked as a management consultant at Bain & Company. He also serves as an independent board member of Bitly and mentors a number of SaaS startups. Nate and Vanessa Quigley. I have known the Quigleys since my undergrad days at BYU. Vanessa is the mother of 7 and co-founder of Chatbooks, a software company with a mission to strengthen families. Vanessa holds a degree in vocal performance and pedagogy from Brigham Young University and worked as a professional singer and actress before becoming an entrepreneur. She was named Ernst & Young's Entrepreneur of the Year in 2017, authored Real Moms, Real Hacks, and hosts the Mom Force podcast. Nate Quigley is co-founder and CEO of Chatbooks, Harvard MBA. At Harvard MBA, Nate started his career as a management consultant with McKinsey & Company, served as CEO of Live TV, and was co-founder of 11 Technologies, a mobile enterprise software company focused on consumer goods industry. Lastly, Scott Paul. Scott Paul is CEO of Woolly.com, which is a platform to drive word of mouth and sales via your customers. He started Myakumo in April to bring American manufacturing of scarce products like respirators and masks to life. This is an incredible panel. I hope you find the content valuable. Please be active on YouTube with questions, with comments, topics you'd like to see us address. Our plan is to answer as many questions, to be as helpful and as tactical as we can be, recognizing that you're going through challenging moments in your businesses right now, and the ability to adapt to the environment ultimately determines the course not only of the near term, but of the longer term success of your business. So thanks, welcome. Gavin, happy to turn it over to you. Thanks for moderating today's panel.
Hey, thanks a lot, Jeremy. Real pleasure to be here. And yeah, since we're all in quarantine, we're all entitled to our quarantine dreams, and excited to get back to, tennis and other things in real life. But a lot of things going on right now for all of us. And I will say that I've given special directive to my kids to no microwaving during the next hour and a half. That's been the bane of my Zoom calls so far. So I'm hoping that I'm able to stay with you this entire time. So I'm really excited to be here with this panel. The goal, knowing that many of you, most of you, are in probably the most challenging period of your careers and of your lives right now. There's a lot of health concerns. There's very legitimate concerns for the survival of your businesses. What you thought was true about your business a couple months ago is no longer true in a lot of cases. It's a very traumatic time for many people. My perspective is informed in my 15, let's say, years of venture capital, and most of that doing seed stage in Utah, having worked with hundreds of entrepreneurs. And a lot of where the perspective I'm coming from is I started Kickstart during the Great Recession in Utah. And so the underlying conviction I have for all of you is that it was lonely starting a venture fund that focused on seed stage in Utah during the Great Recession. It was laughable to some, but it ended up being a great gig, and it's played out really well for us. But a lot of that was the fortitude that we showed through that Great Recession period when nobody cared, and we were able to be first to do this. And many of you have the same opportunity. This crisis, this pandemic, is going to rewrite human behavior, the way markets work in many ways. This is going to be as we all know, this is a generational shift in the way we go about life, and what that means for entrepreneurs is tremendous opportunity. So, just a few thoughts about that. And then we'll get into our discussion with our panel. They have got some great insights for you. The goal of the panel today is to be as, this is a public forum, but for them to be as detailed as they can be and as tactical as they can be to give you advice that can really help you with the decisions that you're losing sleep on, tonight and tomorrow. And then also to give you some thoughts about how you ultimately can get back to building the business that you're dreaming of and that you're hoping you can get back to. So also, just as a side note, when I finish my remarks, we're going to throw out a couple polls to you. One on your thoughts about revenue growth for this year, and one on your thoughts for headcount. So we can get a sense for kind of what you're thinking on those two important topics, and we can kind of play that back to you and get a sense for how you're feeling. I'll first start my remarks by saying, my personal belief is that based on all the things I'm reading, and like you, we're all reading obsessively about what's going on right now, and the experts that we're talking to, and in talking to our entrepreneurs and other VCs, I believe that a lot of small businesses are probably underrating the impact of what's going on in the short term. So unfortunately, I think that's probably consistent, that we're probably in for some rough waters for not just months, but years. However, I think what we'll find as we get further into this crisis that many small businesses, this is what happened in the last recession, are not optimistic enough about what happens in the long term. So I think that will shift, but that's my general view, is that we're excited to get back to work. But unfortunately, COVID is testing is huge, as we all know here on this call. But really what's really huge is a treatment and a cure, and we don't have those yet. And until that happens, business as usual is going to be tough. So a couple of things to think about when we think about adaptation and decision-making for entrepreneurs. One of the key balances that you strike, your leaders, your founders in your respective companies, you have to strike the balance between radical self-belief, which is you're believing something that many people don't think you can accomplish. And so you believe in yourself in an incredible way, and that's to your credit. But you have to balance that with the humility, and this is what we're going to talk about in this call a lot, to know when to change direction, to pivot, to adjust, to lower headcount, to change your strategy, go after a different customer. And so we're going to talk about that, but just we know that there's a lot of tension between that. My advice in general is that now is the time for a little more humility to really get this right. And it's okay to not know exactly what you're doing. None of us do. Even people who've lived through the last few cycles recognize that this is unique. We have 26 million Americans that have filed for unemployment. That dwarfs the Great Recession already. We have $3 trillion of stimulus that's been piled in the economy for basically a month of this. So those are sobering facts, and so no one really knows what to do. But that said, we know we're going to get through it. You can see the amazing innovative spirit of the U.S. in the way the private sector is partnering with the public sector, and in the therapies that are already underway. So those are exciting developments that we're all watching carefully. Another thing we want to talk about today is when is it okay to fail? You're entrepreneurs, you're leaders, you're committed to what you do. There's a few out there that maybe need to stay with stuff longer, but in general, I think the challenge that we want to talk about today is that there are worse things than failing in your business. There are relationships that matter more. There are other things that matter more. And so unfortunately, not everyone's going to make it through this crisis. And many of the best entrepreneurs that I know have had a failure. And unfortunately, that's going to be some of you. And so that's something else we want to talk about today, is that's your mental health, your relationships with others, and your life. At the end of the day, if you fail, you're still an American, and you're still an entrepreneur with a ton of potential. So let's just keep that in mind. Ben Horowitz has a famous comparison where he talks about wartime versus peacetime CEOs, and the things that work in peacetime, i.e., the economy up and to the right, low unemployment, tight labor markets, and people willing to spend on productivity gains, don't necessarily work in wartime. We're in wartime, and we're going to be that way for a while. And that means an adjustment of leadership. It means an adjustment of focus. It doesn't mean that you don't build great cultures. It doesn't mean that you don't invest in amazing technologies, but it means that the level of urgency and the prioritizations are often a little bit different. And we'll talk more about that. A couple more thoughts, and then we'll transition the panel. One is that, early in my investing career, I did a lot of looking at nanotechnology. And one of the interesting metaphors that comes out of looking at nanotechnology, which is focused on things at the nanoscale, is you recognize that at the nanoscale, it's so small that the actual behavior of materials is actually fundamentally different, because the forces like gravity and other things are so small that the micro scale dominates. And one of the things to remember about startups is that there's a macro scale and a micro scale, and we're all, the startups, you're all trying to prove that you have a right to exist, that you have a repeatable and scalable business model. And so the micro scale is often more important than the macro picture. This is a very bleak macro picture that hopefully is going to get better, but your micro is probably still more important. We have a few businesses, frankly, that were struggling pre-COVID that are now rallying, which is amazing. But a lot of businesses were struggling pre-COVID, and COVID is exacerbating an already fundamental challenge. And so I think we need to, as we think about the questions here, think about the micro challenges of, like, have you solved some of the fundamental questions? Have you answered the fundamental questions about your business? Versus how to navigate a macro crisis. And to be honest, I think for many startups, their micro issues are going to kill them sooner than the macro questions. There's been, I laugh at this because there's been a lot of announcement of layoffs on tech fronts for some prominent tech companies, and the trend now is to blame COVID for everything. Oh, we laid off half our workforce, because we raised $1 billion, but it was COVID's fault. It's like, actually, you failed to show that your business is valuable, is what is happening. And finally, this, the final thought here is, this is the moment to really grow up fast. The difference between venture-backed companies, angel-backed companies, and companies that are bootstrapped is not as big right now, because capital, although there's a lot of capital out there and there's a lot of money that we put to work, a lot of companies that have taken capital are going to have a hard time getting more. And so it's time for companies to prove unit economics, to show that and use customer dollars to grow. Right? It's sort of back to basics now. That's always been the culture and the DNA of many Utah companies. It's one of the things that sets us apart, which is awesome. But that's the general theme, is like, hey, but it brings a clarity of focus and a simplicity that can be refreshing. It's like, hey, the customer is not, or they're not investors. That is not the customer. It's the customer is the customer, and we have to work with them to solve real painful problems that they have right now. So with those kind of introductory thoughts, I'd like to just set up the rest of the discussion with the panel. We're going to break it up into a couple really basic elements. The first one is we're going to talk about, how do I survive now? I'm a small business. I had some great things going, or I was already struggling, and I want to survive. What, from our panel of people who have been through a lot and have built amazing businesses, many more than once. How do I survive? And we're going to ask some questions of them to help give their best advice to you on how to survive. And then once we get through that, I want to talk a little bit about how to thrive, and how our decisions in our survival mode can lead to setting us up to thrive as things start to return. Because that's the ultimate goal for all of us. And many on this call are going to be the future titans of their industries. And I fully expect our Utah companies to over-index against their competitors in this environment. So let's just go through the panelists and just have you tell us a little more, how is your business doing? What challenges are you facing, and how are you seeing your role as a leader change in this environment? Dave, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Happy to lead out there. Thanks, Gav. Our business is relatively unique in some ways. We've got a couple of different products: Lucid Chart, Lucid Press. We sell in different ways. We have everything from people paying us $10, a month via the website to, 6- and 7-figure enterprise deals. A third of our revenue is outside the U.S. And so there's a lot of, and we serve just about every industry. So there's a lot of diversity in our customer base and the way we go to market, which, I think as a result, from a business perspective, means there are some real bright spots. I think that we're seeing with right now with everything going on, and I think there's some real challenges. Lucid Chart is a product that helps people collaborate and helps people visually understand what's going on in their business. And so, as more people are working from home, there's a surge of interest, there's a surge of activity, around that. And so that's awesome to see. And I think we're seeing some real benefits there in the US and all over the world. At the same time, we work with a lot of great customers who are struggling, right now. Great names in hospitality and retail and restaurants and real estate. And they're coming to us candidly and saying, we can't pay. We're not going to pay. We love the product, but we literally can't raise a PO or pay for anything right now. There's not a dollar going out the door. And so we're doing our best to try to understand and work with and help those customers as much as we can, while also trying to protect our business and our team. So overall, I would say a mixed bag. Certainly, and it's hard to believe in some ways we're only 5 or 6 weeks into this, at least from a United States perspective. And so, the trends are going in different ways, right? And I know, for the first couple of weeks after kind of mid-March, after President Trump gave his address, things changed dramatically in the U.S. We actually saw, declines on almost every metric, including where we're now seeing bright spots, and those started to recover. And so, I think that's an important thing to remember as we think about our businesses, evaluate our businesses, is though it feels like an eternity, in many ways we're only 5 or 6 weeks into understanding this and understanding what the impacts are going to be on our business, good or bad. And so I'll make one last comment before we go to the others, which I think, from a leadership perspective, what does that mean? I think for me, it's meant, being a great scenario builder, right? Yeah. Because we don't know what this is going to look like. And so, we can talk about it a little bit more later, but, essentially, right, we're trying to dig into, the few key metrics, the few key leading indicators for our business, understanding what the trends are, and then operationally and financially saying, okay, if this plays out how it is right now for a long period. What does that mean for us and our business, and what do we do? What are the levers we pull? If it starts to get better, if there's room for that optimism in 3 months or some other period, what does that look like? And if as Gavin alluded to, if this is longer, then maybe a lot of us may think it may be right now. What does that mean? And actually things get worse, for us and our business. And so right now, I think is a great time for sort of pragmatic optimism and understanding what do those scenarios look like. And I've been, playing that out for the last, couple of months at Lucid.
That's great. Thanks, Dave. Who wants to go next?
I know.
Oh, it's us? We're trying. Our Wi-Fi is not great here, guys. I hope this doesn't cut out on you. Okay, how's Chatbooks doing? Well, better than we were after Rudy Gobert was diagnosed as being positive. That very day, we saw a dramatic drop-off. Are we saying how much?
We're saying 50%.
And the more we talk to other people that day, especially here in Utah, it seems to be to mark a big dip. And so, yeah, that was kind of scary. And we immediately, drew up the forecast of what we need to do, what cost savings we need to make, so that we could ride it out and retaining all of our employees, not wanting to have to do any layoffs, and then readjusting marketing because St. Patrick's Day was coming up, and that's such a fun holiday to have a fun Get Lucky sale, right? But that was a little tone deaf in the climate, so we just threw everything marketing in the trash and started from scratch. And and then the whole work from home thing's been exciting and interesting, and culture has been something that I care deeply about, and I've been adamant that it needed to be one way, and I've completely gone 180 on that after these last few weeks. Not that it's easy, but we've seen some real benefits from it.
I would only throw in, as Vanessa's talking about, kind of taking our marketing plan that we really liked and felt good about for the year, and actually kind of some of our core beliefs about marketing for the last 5 years. We've only been on sale twice a year. We've tried to stay on this kind of high ground of we don't do discounting, and we've priced our product really well, and people just buy it any day of the year. To after Rudy Gobert Day, and we were a week to 10 days into everyone very conscious that this is a crisis, and our sales kind of hanging around 50% of plan, trying to think, okay, maybe we can be on sale a little bit more than twice a year, but how do we get the messaging right so it doesn't look like we're either totally desperate on one hand, or also we don't want to increase the cortisol levels for our customers by having like act now going fast, or flash sale one day only, or countdown clocks and push notifications about you got to get your order in before midnight, which is definitely part of our playbook in a normal time. So we decided to do kind of the peter out sale. There actually wasn't really a deadline. We never even talked about when it was going to be over.
Well, we didn't even start it until our customers started asking for it.
That's
that was
true.
The other thing,
Yeah, we didn't. I mean, it wasn't about St. Patrick's Day. It was like, hey, we're on sale. Is that okay? And then we just kind of stayed on sale for about 10 days and then sort of slowly turned it off. And that really did kind of jumpstart our sales again, thank goodness. But I would just echo what Dave said too. We've had to go into major scenario planning mode of, okay, maybe this is a good recovery. What would that look like? How about a moderate recovery? What would that look like? And we've got a what do we call the sort of prolonged recession? We have a prolonged recession case. We have a deep recession case. And I think none of us know which one of those is going to be right. And so having lots of contingency plans for, what sales look like a month from now, 6 weeks from now, what are our checkpoints where we have to make more decisions about what the futures are actually looking like. Okay, Quigley's, we're going on mute.
Awesome. Let's see. Davis, you want to go next?
Yeah, you bet. So I think to the question of how we're doing, so we sell software to accountants, mainly tax accountants. And so we're in this kind of weird holding pattern because it's been tax season up until very recently. And also actually for the first time in recorded history, the IRS put out the tax filing deadline. So, it's now July 15th as opposed to April 15th. So our typical sort of business calendar was, April 16th, the accountants emerged from their caves, and then we could sell them our products and upgrade existing clients. And we saw this just huge rush of commercial activity. And because we've kind of been in that hibernation phase, it's been hard for us to see exactly how this is going to shake out. So we're optimistic because, the old saying of death and taxes are sort of the two things that don't go away. And so, we think accountants are a relatively stable market. We also think that, it's a fairly backward market technologically. And so we think that they're going to be looking for solutions that enable them to kind of operate virtually, which is something we help them do. So there's some hope there. And then there's, some clouds in terms of, hey, returns are delayed. Is that going to keep them busy for longer? And also accountants are going to have some clients who go out of business. And so the short answer is we don't really honestly know yet. We think, we're hopeful. Our just the couple of days since tax season was supposed to have ended have shaped up okay. And we'll see. So I think, in terms of sort of leadership and what does that mean? I think for me, number one is probably the most important thing, which Dave alluded to, which is just understanding your business incredibly well. If you don't have a really solid financial model, get one. If you as CEO don't understand it and you've outsourced that to a head of finance or someone else, I would strongly recommend understanding the ins and outs of that thing. And then I think number two is just visibility. I think that it's easy in a crisis to disappear a little bit, and you don't get the visibility if you're working from home, which I think most of us are, just walking around and bumping into people as you see them in the kitchen and wherever else. So I think staying visible, whether that's on Slack or Zoom, has also been an important thing that I and members of our executive team have tried to do, just so that people understand, hey, we're here, we're planning, we understand what's going on, and we're conveying that to them to the extent that we can.
That's great. Scott?
Yeah, let's see if that works for me. Okay, perfect. Yeah, I'm the CEO of Woolly, and Woolly is a marketing technology that we had, nice trends going, and then the same thing, jazz players get sick, and immediately we were being told that all budgets are seized. And so what we had to do in a very quick amount of time is figure out how to keep customers engaged, how to keep a sales team employed, and how to keep building product. And so what we did is we're a SaaS company, and we switched into a performance-based company where our revenues will now come from our customers. When they make money, we make money. We're no longer taking money up front as a core revenue model. So that's how we had to adapt, and we didn't really have any choices. We talked to all the biggest customers that we have, and they hit pause. Some of these customers can't even ship their products. Wilson Tennis is one of our customers. They can't even get out of their factories, even if they had e-commerce. Their factories and their shipping facilities aren't deemed essential, so their entire business is a stalemate. And that's just like, it's sad watching some of these icon brands that we were working with absolutely stall. So this has been hard for us, and I would say that the other hard part was in the middle of fundraising. And so that's another hard conversation. A lot of people watching this today, and I know this because I'm in the venture community, people were trying to raise a seed round, a Series A. That the conversations we had in LA were going amazing, and then LA got locked down. Like, there's nothing happening. You can't go fly on a plane and go meet a venture capitalist there or in San Francisco. That's not happening anymore. So you got to get creative in those moments and go to the people go to your first funders and VCs, and go back and then they're being told at their end that they got to pick winners and let the losers die, and that's what they're being told from the top VCs. And so it's, are you a winner? Are you one that they want to hold on to? So we're going through a lot of trials as a small company, but I personally wanted to find a way to keep things alive, and so we had to go and cut a lot of the salaries down, and I went to zero. I took the salary to zero, And I said, I got to make money for myself. I've got a mortgage like everyone else. So I started a face mask company, injection molding masks here in Salt Lake City that service respirators with filters to help the crisis going on. And that company has luckily had, as you can imagine, a face mask company in the last month is allowing me to continue going forward. And I'm using my Woolly, my technology and marketing company to actually get that company to do well. So I kind of talk about the story of, if you remember, Airbnb had used, they sold, before they took off, they used Obama O's. They started selling cereal during the Obama, when he was running for president, I think the first time or second time. No, it's been the first time. And they made their income for a few months off of this cereal that they made that were called Obama O's. And so Woolly's staying alive, and it might be because our new performance-based model of doing marketing will succeed for this mask company called Mia Como. And that's kind of the story. Is sometimes you have to get so creative that you have to walk away or put in hibernation mode the thing that you love and go find income somewhere else. And so a lot of my team is actually finding side hustles too, to stay part-time working with us and part-time making income for their families, because we don't have that. We didn't want to let people go. So that's my story.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate you sharing that. That's a, there's entrepreneur at work there, making it work. It's awesome. Well, let's, I think that gives everybody a good lay of the land where each of our panelists are in terms of their business, how they're thinking about their role. I'd love to just pick on, go the next step from what Scott was saying, which is, I think many of our audience they've just all applied for PPP. Hopefully many have received funds there and bought themselves some additional runway. But they're thinking about, as Dave would say, they're looking at their scenarios and Dave, and modeling those out and kind of saying, okay, what are the levers I can pull here? And just so you guys have a sense, we're going to look at our, actually, we should, can we have those polls? I know you guys have participated in some polls. I don't know if John, we can look at those now. I'd love to see kind of where people are thinking and on their headcount and their revenue.
You bet. Pulling them up right now. Just
thank you.
Just had a little crash. We'll pull them up.
Yeah, no worries. Just let me know when you have them up. But I'd love to kind of dive a little deeper with the panelists and say, okay, what levers should our audience be thinking about, and how should they be making decisions about looking at their revenue, reforecasting revenue. If you want to think about the Kickstart portfolio, I'd probably say that about 50 to 75% of Kickstart companies are having to do some kind of layoff, unfortunately. I think you probably are looking at 10 to 15% who've had at least a short-term positive impact on revenue from COVID, and everybody else is worse. There's some extreme examples. It's like Scott saying, we have a few companies that are up 2 to 3x. One that's in the telemedicine space that just, their raft was right there for the tsunami, and they're just riding it like mad. And there's a few of those amazing stories, but mostly it's worse for everybody. And some it's catastrophic. We've had some that have lost 100% of their revenue in the 6-week period. But if you think about it, there's that big kind of, call it the big 50% chunk in the middle that it's kind of like, we don't know. Okay. Let's see here. Are there results here that we can look at? Yeah, I see the ABCDs.
No results yet.
Okay.
For everyone listening, go ahead and go to that URL. Suze will post that in the chat as well. But what you can see on screen, if you'll go to the URL, thepollev.com, John B242, and you'll be able to submit your responses there. Okay, cool. So yeah, go check out these polls. We just love to just kind of get a sense for where our audience is and what you're thinking about, what your expectations are revenue-wise and for headcount. So, but that gives you a little bit of sense. So let's say like 50% are kind of in the middle where they're revising down, maybe 25, 30% on average. And then there's like that bottom, 10, 20% who've just been devastated. Some of those are great companies.
who are saying, wow, we might have some runway, but we're going to have to really think about getting through, more than a year, 2 years now, because our revenue is dropping off 70%. So that gives you a sense for our portfolio. Okay, love to hear from our panelists. These are filling in real time here. I guess we'll let them fill in real time as we go. This will be exciting. Love to hear from our panelists on what tools they should be thinking about, specifically when to think about layoffs and how to think about them. Maybe think about reducing salaries versus layoff. Maybe thinking about equity instead of salary. Scott brought up the idea of, people are getting, side hustles to keep the dream alive and to keep pushing forward on to kind of buy runway for the company. That's kind of what I did with Kickstart for a number of years to keep the dream alive there. So what levers are you looking at? How are you thinking about the financial side over, in the survive part of the equation?
Hey, Gav, I'll jump in on that real quick.
Yeah.
Just our own experience. And I hate, it's so tough to hear, Scott doing marketing work. The very first break that we, pulled was our marketing spend. And so I'm sure, Scott saw that across a bunch of his clients, and it just sort of trickles down really fast. But we cut our marketing spend by 75% on kind of Rudy Gobert day or day +2, where we thought, wow, if this continues very, very much, we're going to have all kinds of problems. And so we just immediately got into a more defensive crouch, and I think you can't like stay, turtled up forever. But while there was just tons of uncertainty in those early days, we just immediately marketing spend handbrake, because in our business, at least, that just generates a bunch of cash. We feel when the sun is shining and the breeze is blowing and the birds are chirping, we're comfortable buying a customer and then kind of waiting 6 months to have all of that acquisition cost back, on the balance sheet. And that generates a bunch of EBITDA burn, which has implications for our bank covenants and a whole bunch of stuff. And in a more defensive position, we thought to ourselves, we can't afford a 6-month cash payback with this much uncertainty. We need to go to like a 1-month cash, acquisition cost payback, or maybe even a month 0 acquisition cost payback. And to pull that off and pull it off quickly, we took our ad spend down by 75%. And we started looking around for other kind of non-personnel related, immediate EBITDA, or cash flow benefit projects. We wanted to do boring projects that, they save, 20, 30K of EBITDA a month, but we're trying to grow this business and, we'll just get around to that some other time. All of a sudden, those became the really cool projects to work on. Things as tactical and sort of snoozy as changing our credit card merchant processor. We'd known for a long time that there's like $30,000 a month of EBITDA savings there. But when you're in kind of growth mode and future mode and exciting mode, you don't want to prioritize the dev resources required, the ops and finance resources required to sort of do that project. All of a sudden that becomes everybody's favorite project. And we, were able to get that one done in 2 weeks, because instead of, maybe this will be really exciting, a new category for us, it'll drive a lot of revenue. I know for certain that if we just buckle down and do this boring project, it's going to have this kind of cash flow impact. We went through 3 or 4 of those, and I would point anyone who has, software expenses of any sort, if you're on AWS, there's Amazon Web Services, kind of like the banana stand. There's always money in the banana stand. And you just walk in there with a ratchet and a hammer and just tighten things and knock things off. There's another, for us at least, 20, 30 grand every time you look at AWS again. So I think that was one of our big to-dos, was we're in this uncertainty mode. Where's the future going? Tap hard on the marketing spend break, and then wade in to the boring projects that are definitely going to provide, cash flow savings in the really short term.
Gavin, to your point about how if you've gone through a failure in the past, you've kind of steeled and ready for another one. It's really scary to pull back the marketing spend when that's the primary, acquisition.
Yeah.
We had to do that a couple of years ago, like back to zero. And that was a real growth opportunity. It was extremely painful, but it made us a little more confident in pulling back on that and reevaluating in this crisis.
And what's kind of cool is that it does sort of reset everything. And you decide, you know what, I'm not going to be okay with 8-month cash, CAC payback. We got to get down to 1. So hard breaks, and then just start slowly building. How much higher can I push our ad spend and still keep acquiring customers at these really attractive CAC paybacks? And we're kind of in a mode now for the last, I would say, 2.5 weeks of every day we're like just tapping throttle forward a bit more, and we're going to get closer to, I don't know if we'll get all the way back up to our run rate spend before Rudy Gobert Day, but we're just sort of easing on up there and keeping an eye on what our like and what the implications are for cash. But beyond that drastic one, there's everybody's got a banana standard too, where if you're willing to do boring grunt work, you can find some cost savings.
It's awesome. I think that's great advice. Very actionable for our audience. Who'd like to go next? Davis?
I would just say, so Canopy actually had, for a whole host of reasons I won't bore you with, went through a round of pretty significant layoffs through 2019. And so we've actually got like a really lean, mean team. And so I don't think, that's going to be something we're going to need to do. But what we have done is we've aggressively renegotiated a bunch of contracts. I mean, a lot of the companies here are going to have very large contract with Salesforce. A lot of companies here are going to have like a Zenefits type provider. AWS was already mentioned. Most of us have landlords. And it's not a fun thing to do. And you even feel a little bit of guilt doing it because they're also businesses. But I think you can generate significant cost savings by looking at those. The other one that I mentioned is your relationship with your lender. Hopefully you have a lender who understands what's going on and also has good liquidity. But our lenders, SVB, they've been incredible. We have a credit facility with the debt facility with them, and I didn't go to them; they came to us, and we had a great conversation. So I would encourage people not to hide from those conversations. Sometimes you can feel like it's you're in college and your landlord's knocking on the door, but open up, be super transparent, and push as aggressively as you can, and that will often generate some pretty material cash savings.
I think that's really good. I would just want to underline what Davis said, which is don't wait to have those conversations. I think your point of highest leverage as a small business is when you still have the cash and you're deciding how to allocate it. And so that's your point of highest leverage. These people are all trying to stay in business. You want to be collaborative, but you recognize that you're fighting, we're looking at these revenue expectations coming in. You're fighting for your business. You're fighting for, what you worked so hard for. And so it's okay to negotiate hard and try to get the best deal you can to get yourself the runway you need.
And Gavin, if I can just jump in for just a second, because I think this raises an interesting question, maybe on the other side as well, where many of us are going to have customers coming to us, trying to renegotiate really aggressively as well. And I think one of the first things, that we did as a team was we looked at all of our customers who are renewing in the next 90 days above a certain threshold of spend with us. And then we eventually took that out 180 days and took it to a lower spend. And, we looked at their activity, their usage of our product, our internal signals. But then we, for a day or two, we were armchair economists, and we tried to understand, from the outside view, what was the likely impact that they were experiencing, from this, pandemic. And, I think that was really helpful, because then that let us have the right kind of discovery calls with our customers. It was clear when retail customers came to us and said, we need to renegotiate, or we need to talk about concessions, that makes a lot of sense, and we can have the right discovery there. At the same time, I think one thing that we have to be careful about as operators is being willing sometimes to say no to customers, because right now there's a lot of advice to companies I think across the spectrum, some who are doing very well still and some who aren't doing well, that your procurement team should go to every provider and demand 30 to 50% off. And I think, again, where they're experiencing real pain, you know, we're trying to do everything we can to be a great partner and collaborative and so on. You know, where you know, there's no clear indicators that maybe their business is doing any worse than our business, you know, we're going to have that deep discovery with them to really understand it, so that we can come to kind of the right resolution there. And so I'll just be thoughtful about that, because as much as we need to, you know, control costs, we also need to do the right things to protect revenue, including having some hard conversations, you know, at times with customers.
I love that. I love that's super important, right? That's how you protect your existing cash flow. You know, and I just encourage, the other thing I would add is let's, you know, encourage to be collaborative in these conversations. It's a chance to really build lifelong relationships and play a long game, but also save your businesses. So maybe taking a look at our poll before we move to the next one. About 5% were saying, hey, my revenue is about the same. You know, down between 0 and 50%. And yeah, oh, it moved. Okay, but let's call it like 75-ish is, you know, I mean, you know, the 30% that are only down 25%, that's actually pretty great. And then you've got, you know, down 25 and down more than 50, you know, with about 50%. So that's about what I expected. And the 17, you know, being up 25% is awesome. You know, and let's all hope we get testing and therapies figured out so we can rally out of this thing. If that does happen, we are, you know, this is an exciting, but this is about what I expected. There's obviously a lot of pain, and this is, you know, this is after, you know, kind of 5-6 weeks of this. So good to know. And, you know, hey, this sucks. We're sorry, but we're all doing it together. Yeah, let's move on to the next poll that focuses on headcount. That'd be good to see that. So continuing on the topic with our panel of really focusing on what levers for them to look at. I think there's some great advice on marketing spend, discretionary spend, great advice on negotiating with vendors and you know, other relationships. What other levers should they be looking at from our panel?
So this is obviously, I love what Davis was saying about renegotiating when possible. The other kind of big bucket of things to look at, I think, is what can you just stop doing that's costing money or that has a longer kind of, you know, return on investment cycle. So I am so old, my third crisis. You know, I was actually a startup entrepreneur in 2001 and 2, which was not a great time, not a fun time. And our little software company, you know, that was going to require a lot of fundraising to get to scale and what we were originally set out to do in the food and beverage industry. We just weren't going to get there. There was no way we were raising a Series B in 2002. So we had that absolutely brutal experience of going from about 60 people that we'd recruited over 2 years down to 11, and then firing 20 customers at the same time and focusing on the one that could actually, you know, pay the bills. And so the only way we were going to be able to, you know, pivot that business and kind of ride out that really tough recession was focusing on the one customer. In our case, it was Pepsi, that, you know, had could continue to write checks in 2001 and 2002. And it was really rough, obviously, as we worked through the process of you know, completely changing what the company was trying to accomplish. And he was there and part of the business. But it kind of started with saying, these other 20 customers, you know, they're not profitable now and they're not going to be profitable unless we had 2,000 customers like them, or it wasn't quite 2,000, but it was a number we were never going to get to in the current, in that new fundraising environment of that recession. So we just had to absolutely cut scope like crazy. And as a result, cut our costs and get to what we called at the time, I put a nice name on it, rather than saying that we'd become a custom software developer for Pepsi, which is really kind of the reality of what it was. We were just doing software dev for hire for Pepsi. we called it customer funded joint development.
There you go. Yeah.
And we somehow convinced them to let us keep the IP, repackage the IP, and then as the sun started to shine again, we were able to sell that same software to Procter and Gamble, to other consumer packaged goods companies. But for a good 12 months, almost 18 months, we were basically just a little custom dev shop for Pepsi. And, it was a far cry from like the ambitions we'd had as we started the company, but at least we lived to fight another day.
Yeah, that's excellent. We have seen a number of enterprise SaaS companies use that playbook during times like these. And often it's interesting how that trigger of saying, you know what, we actually need to let go of some of our customers because they're not profitable and they're taking us away from the core focus, that one thing that everybody cares about or that one customer cares about. It's interesting how that can spark a lot of innovation. Other thoughts on tools that our small businesses should be thinking about as they figure out how to survive? Scott, any thoughts there? I mean, you've given some great thoughts already.
Yeah, I can just walk through. I'm very small, so we only have 24 people across Ukraine and the United States, and mostly remote. And so we had 3 weeks ago a company call with everybody, and just said, this is the reality. And I did what you said, Gavin, or I think someone was saying, while you still have some money, you got to kind of have to do these hard questions, these hard things. I didn't want to wait till the very end where we were totally out and then make this call. So we did it earlier, and we said, we want to keep everybody, but we're going to have to cut drastically pay. And I can tell you that day I thought was going to be the hardest day. It was the responses from the team. If you built that relationship with your team, the responses of some of the members was like a spiritual experience for me. Our highest paid lead developer said, I came here to build customer commerce. That's kind of the thing we're trying to build at Woolly. I came here to build it, and I'm not leaving until I've built that. And the money wasn't a situation. I started crying. Like, this guy he's coming to be on the team at any cost, and I know his family's going to hurt from having to take that deduction and pay. But it was that you would be very surprised that the team's response to to this hard time. We're all together. Nobody thinks you're doing something because of something they did. They know that this is the nature of the world right now. And so I encourage people to look at headcount and labor, because it's one of the biggest expenses. You have to look at that, and instead of just chopping some people out, maybe there's a way you can talk to everybody, taking a step down a little bit and seeing who will come there. We did equity. We are paying equity, so people that do stay can make some of that money in equity instead. And then it also just drove us. We made everybody a salesperson. Like, everybody's got to eat what they kill now, in a way. And those are the three things we did to try to reduce costs and hopefully get some income from more people than we did before. And so that it was a very hard day, but it ended up being one of the most interesting days that I've yet to write about. And it was because I just feel like it's something I want to document for to tell my children. It was
awesome.
It was I never thought I'd get those response from people.
That's awesome, Scott. That's amazing. Thanks for sharing that. I think that one of the things that entrepreneurs do that sometimes they don't even realize they do is you're creating businesses, you're creating livelihoods, but you're also creating meaning for people, for employees, for customers. And if you do it right, you build a lot of equity, and people, your employees value that, and they want to feel more like owners. And so, include them in the process. So I think that a related question I'd like to put to the panel that I think is even a little more sensitive, which is, it's stressful to be a leader in any environment. It's probably the most stressful right now. You're having to make personnel decisions. You're having to reassess your dreams. You're having to make a lot of hard choices, hard negotiations. It can be lonely. You may not have anyone to talk to about it. What are you? I'd love to ask the panel their advice for the mental health of our audience. What do you do that helps you stay grounded, to keep perspective, so that you're not, the worst thing is to lose your business and lose everything else in your life that matters. And it's also, one of the things that we try to bang on, it's also really important to win with your business and win in the other areas of your life as well. So those go together. But this is a tough environment. I'm curious, I know for me, I'll say a really important thing I do is, I kind of wake up early and exercise, and that usually was tennis, and now it's VR. It's like Ninja Assassin in VR. I'm out chopping up ninjas and boxing, and it's like amazing how I kind of feel like I start the day with momentum and can kind of get going. And I try to treat work from home days like normal days. I'm ready to go problem solve, but it can be a lot. So I'm curious what do you do to kind of keep yourself grounded? I know, mental health is a real challenge, and it's chronic in the entrepreneurial community, chronic problem.
Well, Gavin, I'll speak about this for a minute. I unmuted already. We're lucky because we actually we do have someone to talk to. We maintain different offices. He's downstairs, I'm upstairs. And, with all the kids at home, it does add a new added strain. But, a couple months before this all happened, we started using Tafa Health with our whole company. We personally recognize through our experiences and with our family that, addressing mental health is so important. And so we decided to add that as a benefit for the whole company and all of their dependents. And even before COVID hit, like watching the take rate for that was really, really impressive. And as we've gone weeks and weeks into this, to see how many people are using that benefit is just a testament to how important it is. And we've been really candid with our team about how we're using it and the benefit that we feel in our life as a result. But we also start, every day, at least in a marketing team, with the check. We've used Qualtrics has a tool that you can send to your whole team to kind of check in and see how people are doing. I think, with us all spread out all over town or the country, just over communicating for more clarity on how, obviously how people are doing with shipping the work that they're expected to ship. But this mental health piece is so important, and I don't think we can talk about it enough.
One other little tactical thing that we think is important is just moving more of our work to asynchronous mode, so that you don't have to feel like you're, trapped down in the basement office for 9 hours a day, waiting for the Slack you have to respond to right away, or, the fourth Zoom call in a row. But instead, hey, if the sun is shining and you can go out and go for a run, like go, and just continue to try to find ways to change the culture to support our overall health, especially our mental health. And for us, that's required getting more asynchronous and not trying to pretend like it's business as usual, a bunch of hours in a row at the office and a bunch of meetings, but they're just now on Zoom. We've tried to rethink how we actually get our work done to allow people to just get up and get away from their desk more frequently.
That's awesome. Great ideas. I should also add, I'm trying to be more vulnerable. I'm actually also doing counseling myself. I'm doing personal counseling. I'm also doing marriage counseling from what I did for the last crisis. So, that's part of my advice is, hey, just invest now and you won't have to be kind of doing makeup like I'm doing. How about other folks? What are you guys doing?
This is Scott again. I didn't do anything except for be vulnerable on LinkedIn, and the amount of people that came to me after I kind of had a episode with trying some ADHD medicine and kind of talked about it. I had probably 3,000 messages between LinkedIn and stuff like that. And I've been still fielding them to this day of people reaching out with their story. But out of that came about 3 really close mentors that are just there for mental health for me and in their entrepreneurship community. And I'll call them out right now. It's Johnny Hanna of Homey has been like one of my you can text him anytime at night and he's there. And it's like, I needed that. So like one thing I look for or realized I needed was a kind of just a mentor or a buddy system for mental health. And I would encourage everybody to, male and female, entrepreneur, not entrepreneur, go find that kind of buddy system. It could be a spouse, but it's really helpful if it's someone that's an entrepreneur that's been through the same hardships that you're going through and understands that. And that buddy system for me has been, and a lot of people right here on this call are also, I've been in a lot of talks with Nate and Vanessa and Corey from Taft and a lot of the entrepreneurs that are very vocal about struggling with mental health. These people are rallying together and happy to talk to not just, other CEOs. They want to talk to their employees. They want to talk to people on social media and explain their story and talk to and be a coach for you if you're going through something like that. I've never seen anyone turn somebody down, for saying, hey, I'm not okay, I need some help. So find that buddy or do that buddy system, and that's been life-saving for me.
It's awesome. Thanks, Scott. That's terrific. So we do have, if there's more thoughts on kind of this topic, happy to hit it. I would like to just change gears slightly here and hit some questions from the audience. And maybe we just have one of the panelists weigh in on each of these. Any other thoughts on mental health from the panel? I think we're good. So a couple great questions here from the audience that we'll field, and then we'll move to thriving, because that's what we're all going to do. Is once we survive, we're going to get back to thriving. So first question is more about, we've had some comments on this, how about remote work? How are you keeping your team engaged in uncertainty, and how are you managing things from a distance? So maybe any additional ideas about how you're having remote work work for your team?
Maybe I'll go ahead, Davis.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, I'll go first. Thanks, man. Just a couple kind of things on this. I know there's a lot of great ideas out there, and I know the first kind of company update we did, we did via Zoom, and it was sort of like this, where you don't get a lot of feedback from the audience per se, and that was kind of tough. And people appreciated what we shared because we have a culture of I think radical transparency. For a long time, we walked through every board deck with every employee of the company in company update. Eventually, people told us that was boring, so we stopped doing that. But we try to be as open as we can about all the parts of the business. That said, one change that we made that was very simple is when we did our company updates, we had a Slack channel, company update, where the whole company could be in there, and it was just like amazing energy. We've been doing it the last few weeks because people are throwing out shout outs at whoever's talking. They're asking questions, just so much energy, which candidly, I think in many ways more energy than we've had when we were together. And so I think that's a very simple tactical idea, but that has been awesome. I think for us, I think others. Carl is our CEO, and he's been doing sort of different 3-minute videos and then throwing out shout outs to other people to follow him. So we got to watch Carl do science experiments with his kids, and again, just a fun way to sort of see what other people are doing, to share some common experiences. Has been great. So I mean, those have been a couple of things that have been, I think, the fun and energetic side of things. And again, I think we've tried to be really open with people, which I think is important, because I'll just make one last comment here, which is I came out of school in 2008, and I was fortunate that my job was still existed, even though a lot of my friends had their job offers pulled, and I went to Bain & Company, which was a management consulting firm. And I remember, in retrospect, in many ways, I knew things were bad, in the economy, but I didn't realize how bad. And I remember personally, I made a stink, about like, oh, we're not doing an offsite to Mexico anymore. We're driving to Austin from Dallas now. Oh, how terrible. And so I think because I was early in my career, I was just a little bit more naive, and I didn't understand everything that was going on and how Bain's business actually worked. And so I think this has been also a time, to make sure that every employee, whether we're 6 people or 600 people, really understand, the value of our product, really understand why customers, care about what we do, how the business works, so that they can be a really meaningful part of it, and understand the decisions that we're making along the way, even the painful ones.
It's awesome. That's great. Davis?
Yeah, I think I want to address more the uncertainty piece of it, which I think is such a great question, because we are in an unprecedented situation, and anyone who claims to know exactly how this is going to shake out is lying. And so I think that is a challenge for people, though. We like to know, we want certainty, we crave it. And so I think, what we've tried to do, number one, is just be very honest about what we do and what we don't know. And I think that that's gone a long way in establishing credibility and admitting when we don't know something, that when we do say we do know something, then people take us seriously. And we've done that about things like, when are we going to all come back to the office? What is our Q2 revenue number going to look like? How is this going to impact our roadmap and our fundraising and da 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 da. So I think that's been a really important thing to do. And I think, it reminds me of the Stockdale Paradox from Good to Great, which I think is this powerful principle where Admiral Stockdale, who was a POW of Vietnam, realized that, the people who died were the optimists, right? Because they were always setting like, hey, we're going to be out by Christmas, or we're going to be out by Easter, and we're going to be out by July 4th. And when they weren't, their hopes were crushed and they lost the will to live. And so I think just being super honest with people and saying, look, this is uncertain. We don't know. It could be a while. It could be bad. But then also, of course, presenting, say, look, we have plans for this. We have scenarios. We have lots of if-thens in place, and this is how we're going to play it, I think has been very important. I think on the remote side, we've just developed a much more sort of stringent discipline around OKRs, which, if you're not using incredible, powerful sort of goal-setting accountability methodology, that I think, you can sort of fake it a little bit when you're around each other, and you can just kind of, ask people at the water cooler how project XYZ is going. We don't have that as much anymore. And so I think that having those formalized, documented, accessible, visible has been a real push for us. And we've seen great benefits from that that I think have outweighed some of the downside of working remotely.
It's great. Terrific. So next question for our panel. At what point do you know you need to do a total transformation into a different business model? And I would add to the question, how do you do that before you're out of money? No takers on, it's a tough question. What are the signs?
Well, I already mentioned that we did that in my first startup during the first, I call it the first recession. First recession I had to, be a startup CEO through. We just, we talked about scenarios, and in that moment, we didn't have a scenario on the existing business model and the existing sort of thing we set out to build, given the fundraising environment that ever got us there. I can't remember what the number was, but it was just some number of customers we were never going to get to before we were out of money at our, the burn rate we had. So it was just one of those, okay, well, that road leads nowhere. There's not a set of assumptions I can make myself believe survives. And so who do we know that has any money? And we literally changed our sales and prospecting methods too. And this is going to sound sort of stupid, but we said, we're not going to go on a sales call unless there's a big granite tombstone on the way into the parking lot with a big, huge logo on it that you've like purchased that product before. They have to have multiple flagpoles in front of the building, where one of the flagpoles has like the company flag on it.
Just as an indication of their coffers.
And then
right?
you needed to see like landscapers milling about, on your way from your car to the front door. And if you didn't have granite tombstone, multiple flagpoles, and like hordes of landscapers milling about, we were in the wrong place, because we needed, big checks that were going to cover months of payroll. And so that was just kind of part of changing everybody's mindset on the kinds of customers we were even thinking about. But it was mostly because we just we couldn't that didn't lead to company out of business. It's totally over.
Well, because your main priority is not to run out of money. And I actually thought you were going to tell a different story about the company that you were doing before Chatbooks, where we were out of money, and as a result, you had to completely change the business.
Nobody wants to hear that story.
That's the key. That's the key indicator, though, because you can't run out of money.
Yeah. I mean, rule number one is don't run out of cash, obviously. So if you can't come up with a scenario or set of things you can believe where you avoid that, it's time to change.
And I think that's just for our audience, that's been the theme for the panelists, which is the scenario analysis piece. And you don't have to be a finance expert, this is kind of basic spreadsheet stuff. And it's also just I mentioned the importance of humility, just taking and saying, hey, just getting back to basics doesn't mean your dream is not going to happen. It just means that you need to survive for a minute to be able to get back to thriving. So let's hit the final audience question here. Yeah, and I guess this will take us into the thriving. What are examples of companies you guys know, the companies that are thriving, and what are they doing right in this environment? I'm happy to share some as well. But do you guys have examples of some of you're like, wow, that was clever that they figured that out?
I would just mention, I think a couple that come to mind are Divvy and Lendio. They're sitting there, financial services, technology, and then I think they both did, not entire pivot, but they sort of took their existing technologies and people and teams and then spun up incredibly quickly on the PPP stuff. I know others have done it as well. Those are the two that I was most familiar with. And so I think that's a great example where, some people may need to do a full pivot and just go do something different. And I think the sooner you do that, the better in that event. But I think there's a lot of folks right now that are sitting, next to some really great opportunities. It may be a little bit of a different business model, a slightly different clientele or approach. And, they can sort of marshal those bodies and that capital and that time in a really smart, interesting way. I know there's a couple others around here that, some people are getting lucky, right? They're just in these, it's like the raft with the tsunami thing. Yeah. But I would point to those guys as people who, that isn't just luck, right? They saw an opportunity and they ran for it.
See, I'm going to raise my hand I see a lot of innovation in the physical, so the non-software space. You're seeing a lot of companies who ship goods, and they're moving we're hearing a lot of PPP and PPE, the protective gear. So lots of the e-commerce companies in town have shifted their facilities from making boat covers to face shields, from to I can't tell you how many things. Rustica Hardware used to make barn doors. Now they're making work from home desks that are everyone's working from home, right? So you're seeing a lot of retooling of American manufacturing towards something that might have been a consumer good that was more luxury to Susan at Freshly Picked making face masks. A lot of people are making solutions to kind of stay alive, and and I think that's a unique pivot to kind of pad the bottom line. But the question is still really valid. Who's going to come out? Who's going to come out of this completely new? Who's going to be born during March or April 2020 and become the next Airbnb or unicorn? I'm looking for those. I'm really interested in who's going to be born during this time and why, and what are they solving. DoorDash is obviously an awesome thing that wasn't quite born, but it'll institute their dominance along with Amazon, others. I'd love to know if anybody knows of somebody being born. I like to think I'm doing something like that, but I'm right place, right time. I want to know somebody that's like going after something right now that will sustain for a long time. And maybe you guys have that in your own companies or know somebody here in Utah doing that.
Awesome. So maybe we've got about 15 minutes left, and this has been an amazing discussion. It's probably good to transition to more on our advice from our panel on thriving. On Scott's last point, who's going to be born? Certainly at Kickstart, we believe we're really excited over the next several years to not only invest as actively as we've been over the last 10 to 15, but more actively, and especially at the earliest stages. We'll have more news on that coming out over the next few weeks. But we believe the entrepreneurial crop that gets through this and figures out how to thrive is going to be, these are the new bellwethers. This is going to be the crucible that great companies are born, great people come into their own. This will define our lives, for better or worse, right? This is going to be interesting. So let's transition to thriving. So I just, I have a bunch of questions, but my guess is let's just, try to sum it up in one, which is, how do we know when to move to offense? And what's an insight that you have, that you've learned, that you'd like to share with the panel? Something that you think is not obvious, and I know that makes it tough. So it can be obvious and profound at the same time. But just, that you'd like the panel to know, as we think about thriving as we get through this, and let's hope it's sooner rather than later. It could be. One comment I would make is like, okay, the U.S. as it relates to COVID was never going to be Singapore or China. We're not good. We're not Germans. We don't comply very well. But you think about what makes America amazing, right? All politics aside, we're innovators, right? We're individualists. We're innovators, and our innovation will save the world. That's what's going to happen. That's already clear. The therapy for COVID is going to come out of the U.S. It's already in process, and so that's what we do. That's what the people on this call do. And so let's talk about that. How do we get back to that?
Gavin, maybe I'll go first, and I don't know if this is obvious or profound, but I'll go ahead. Which is to say that I think it's in times of like great changes in companies when either the company culture and core values are cemented or destroyed. And so as we think about thriving long term, like, no, this is not a lever to like get more revenue tomorrow or next month, but in terms of creating an enduring company, I think this really matters. I remember when we were about 20 people, and we knew we were going to be hiring a lot of people, so sort of a different circumstance, but we were going to be changing the company a lot. And so we went and we talked to a lot of founders and executives and said, what should we be thinking about, right? What's going to help us in the next year or two? What advice can you give us? And almost all of them came back and said the same thing, which was really define and articulate your culture and your core values now, or else you may lose it. And I admit at the time, this was a long time ago, but I was disappointed by the answers, right? I wanted someone to tell me how I was going to, increase my revenue the next day or the next month or the next year. And this was not that, but we took the time as a company, really a few of us, the executive team and a couple of others in the company, to sit down for a day and articulate, why do we exist? Why are we here? And what are the core values that we, really want to hold to as we grow? They weren't aspirational, right? They were sort of what we had already that we wanted to hold on to as we grew. And, even though I had some skepticism of the value of doing this at the time, looking back, there has probably been few things that have been more important, than taking that day and then actually sort of infusing that so deeply. Because it's the people and it's the culture that defined a lot of Lucid's success to date, and hopefully that will continue in the future. And so again, I understand the skepticism if you're listening and saying, I'm trying to survive right now, and understand how to make payroll. You really want me to take a few hours to articulate this? And I'd say, well, maybe stabilize, but don't miss the opportunity, because this will be a time when your company culture and core values will probably be defined for the rest of its existence.
Awesome.
Yeah, I want to echo that. That's 100% what's happening with our team, and we've been really culture and communicating culture, and have actually produced a chapbook that sums up our culture for our team. And right now we are writing version 4 of that because things have changed so dramatically. Our values haven't changed. We continue to communicate those values, but the norms and the way that we work, I never once thought that I would want, would want a fully distributed team. But I can see some real perks to it. And it's forcing us to change the way we communicate, more asynchronous, the way Nate was talking. But I think we're going to be stronger. Like, adversity is what makes us strong. And so we, as a team, we're going to be stronger, even though there's lots of bumps in the road. And luckily for us in Chatbooks, people are taking a lot of pictures, documenting their quarantine life. And so, our sales dropped dramatically, but we're coming back strong, and we're in a position where we can really think about culture and communicate on that. But another thing that I think is we're going to be thriving with is, we're a consumer-facing company, and so talking to our customers is a big part of what we do. And this is a moment where we can connect with them on a real, raw, authentic level. And the impact that's having in our marketing has been really significant. And I think that'll have lasting changes. And so I'm excited about that piece.
That's a great point. Not just our companies coming closer together and those bonds being stronger than ever, getting through this adversity together, but with our customers, And I think, we're thinking about our consumer customers and how they could really attach them to our brand in a way that maybe, just a totally fine set of circumstances wouldn't allow, but definitely would be true in a business facing world. And like I come back to this Pepsi story again. We were close. Like, we survived that first recession together, and that was important.
Yeah, it's great, guys. Thanks.
I think as far as when to start kind of, putting the gas on, it's hard to time, it's hard to catch a knife, as they say. I would just say that I think that, man, for those who can survive this time, there's going to be incredible opportunity. There's going to be so many people who are looking for jobs, amazing talent. We've had such a hard labor market here for so long. I think you're going to be able to hire a ton of wonderful people. I think you'll be able to acquire clients and so forth. So my personal view is probably going to take a little longer than we would all hope, but time will tell. I think on the, I would just, I was reading through my great grandfather's personal history, and he went through the Depression as a small business owner up in Ogden. And, he just talked about how he wanted so badly to weather this in a way that his family would remember him well for. And I think that, that's been a personal goal of mine, but it's also been a goal for us as a company, because I think that, if we do right by our people and our customers, it's really easy to do that in a bull market, with, there's money everywhere, and it's hard to fail. But I think that if we do right by our people as a company right now and our customers, they will be with us forever. And I think that, we've seen examples of people who do it the right way and people who do it the wrong way. And so I think that regardless of the business outcome, those who do it the right way will be remembered for that. And, that their future opportunities as companies and individuals will be defined by that.
Amen. That's awesome. Scott?
Well, it's hard. It's unique for me right now because I'm actually the most excited I've been in a while, because I have something thriving, and I haven't had that for 3 years. And so I'm here just to say, like, there's optimism. I pivoted, tried something. I've been on the phone calls with ExxonMobil and the Pentagon and some other big agencies trying to help them out. And I just got investment today from Mark Newman, who's doing Know Me Health and helping with Test Utah. And so I am thriving, and I just kind of want to share that there are people right now and businesses not just thriving, but helping too. And so I think they're out there, a lot of opportunities with your own business. And it's good for my mental health to be on with something that's thriving right now. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that. We're going to see a lot of people that are going to come out of this. I've invested in several companies, angel investor, and one of them is called Prenda. And luckily they're doing homeschool for like Airbnb of homeschool and teaching micro schools. Well, they're in a great place. They just closed their Series A. They are doing during this crisis, right? So there's thriving happening, and we need to examine those thriving examples of businesses and see what we can do. Are we in the wrong industry? Are we putting the wrong message out? Are we, what can we do to look more like the thriving things right now? It's all around going to be hard because money is going to be cut in half, and we're paying back the debt of trillions of dollars for the next 100 years. So it's going to be a money crunch, but there's still ways to thrive. And so I'm very optimistic right now, just because I'm seeing so many people in this valley doing things that make it look like business as normal. I don't want to be tone deaf to the suffering that's really happening. I'm in quarantine right now because 5 of my friends have COVID and are sicker than a dog. And I'm looking at my wife on the bed who also might have it. So this is a real problem, right? They're suffering, but like I would rather be healthy mentally and physically during the suffering and be trying to build something than thinking about it all day long and worrying.
That's very good. Well, I this is probably a great note for us to wrap on. I really appreciate the panel and the insights, the vulnerability, the great wisdom from many hard, arrows in the back over the years of doing it wrong, learning and pivoting, and just would just end on a note of encouragement for the entrepreneurs out there to take care of themselves, and seek wisdom from others, and to believe in yourself, and recognize that, in my view, as someone who's invested in a lot of people in a lot of startups, is, you think about the micro factors that I talked about and the macro factors. There's probably not a better time to build a big company and to do it right, and to win your market if you can navigate what we're talking about, because you're going to get so many less Me Too, coastal companies that are just copying what you're doing and copying your innovation. Those people, those kind of peacetime companies are toast. So this is the time for real entrepreneurship that's validated by customers. You do that, and you can create a huge company in this environment. So, here's to all of you doing that. So thank you so much for listening in. Jeremy, I'll turn it back to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Gavin. What an awesome conversation. Really appreciate just the honesty of the moment, the challenges. I appreciated the optimism. I enjoyed the conversation that we started on mental health, the strength that folks have found in the community. That's obviously critical, is actually a topic that we've learned as we've polled SMBs across the state, that was not only important weeks ago, but we're seeing in our pulse survey that this one is actually rising very quickly. And so this is going to be the topic of our deep dive next week, next Thursday evening. We've got a great panel assembled. Clearly something that is, we're early innings, and something that we've got to figure out how do we manage and come through this. But I did appreciate the optimism and all the commentary. Wish you all well during this moment. And thanks for joining. Look forward to having you and your colleagues, peers, friends join us next Thursday evening at 5. Thanks again. All the best.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.